Hi, I'm Ben Shelley, and this tutorial will be a beginner's guide to texturing. Before we start, you will need to have the 24 button shelf set up shown in previous tutorials, and the textures shown in the links in the description below. They all need to be in your source images folder for a project in Maya. So I'm just going to show you some quick and very simple examples of ways to assign textures. So we're going to go ahead and create some really simple geometry here. I'm going to start off with a plane just there. I want to extrude just a couple of edges here. I'm just going to give the road a bit of a bump in the middle. Pull it out like that and pull that face up. I'm just going to create a building to go next to it on this side, and a barrel just against the wall over there, and what's going to end up being a TV that someone's thrown away as well. So I'm just going to put that cube down there. Okay. So the first thing we're going to do is assign a cobblestone texture to this road. So if we go ahead and go to right click, and we're going to go to assign new material, we're going to create a Lambert, and we're going to name it cobblestone, and click on the checkerboard here next to color. Again, if you lose this window, it's just up here in your attribute editor. Go along to what you've just named as cobblestone and go to the checkerboard next to color. Click on file, click on the yellow folder, and we're going to go to the cobblestone texture. So unless your geometry is a perfect plane or something like that, you'll see that when Maya tries to assign the texture, it doesn't do a proper job. So we need to tell Maya how to project this texture onto this geometry so it doesn't look like that. So what we're going to do is go into the UV texture editor. This is located in edit UVs, UV texture editor. I've got mine on my shelf there. So I'll bring that up. And this is obviously showing your geometry, your 3D geometry in a 2D environment. So just as your geometry has these purple vertexes at the corners of each face, in your UV texture editor you can see it's selected the same UVs, but if I go to right click, and I can go to, oh, I've said that wrong. So if you select your geometry in the 3D view, you can see at the end of each face there are vertexes. So each face obviously has 4 vertexes that you can move in the 3D world. You can see these also selected in the UV texture editor in the 2D environment, although you will be unable to move them in there. This is because you need to change your selection to UV mode instead of vertex. So if you go to right click, go to UV, and if you drag a box or selection box over your geometry in the UV editor, you will then be able to move it around, and you can see in your Maya viewport how that is shown. So if you want to have your texture showing larger in your 3D view, just click on R for resize after going to UV and selecting everything, and then you can scale it up and down. Now in the UV texture editor, you have to remember that the texture that you see in the top corner is repeated in each of these axes, and it's actually repeated above and around it for infinity as well. So I can enlarge that as much as I like, and the texture will be repeated in Maya. Now whoever created the cobblestone texture did a good job of setting it so it can be tiled properly without showing any nasty edges. So we don't have to worry about that for now. But we do need to sort out the scales of these. So what we'll do is undo that, and we're going to set up a completely new way of projecting this. So if you click on your geometry in the 3D view in Maya, I'm going to close out of my UV texture editor for now, and we're going to just press spacebar and go to one of our orthographic views here. Just make sure you press 6 on the keyboard to show shaded view. So if we spacebar into the top view, because this is the view that we know we want to project the texture from, we can go to create UVs, and you can see at the top it's got planar mapping. We're going to click on the box next to planar mapping, and we're going to tell it, by default it might be from one of these other axes, but we're going to tell it to project from the camera. So whichever angle your camera's at, that will be like a projection source for your texture. So we're going to click on camera and click project, and you can see it's although it's a bit stretched, it is all at the same scale now. So if I was projecting from the side view here, I'll demonstrate that for you quick, and then we go and look at it from the top. So because there's a slight bevel or bump to the road at the very top where it's perfectly perpendicular to the camera, it's completely stretched the texture, which is why it's important to make sure you're in the correct view and planar map it from there. So now if we go back into the UV texture editor, you can see your geometry there. You can modify the way it's shown using the this projection tool here, although I prefer just to go straight into the UV texture editor. So if you go to right click, go to UV and just select everything, and you can see here 3 faces of your road are represented in here as well. Obviously we need to try and get the shape in the UV texture editor to match how it is in the 3D viewport. So it's not a perfect square, it is a rectangle, so we're going to stretch it up a bit, and then we're also going to press R and resize it out so the cobblestones are about the right scale. If I want to rotate the geometry in the UV texture editor, obviously you can press E and you're still free to do whatever you like there, but I know that my cobblestones aren't going to be at any angle, they're going to be perfect to the road. So press undo, and you can see up here you've got these rotate buttons. I wish they had them in Maya, but all we have to do now is make sure all of your geometry is selected through the UVs, and then go to rotate, and it rotates it by 45-degree integers for us. So I've done that and I'm quite happy with the result there. The next thing we're going to do is just make this building slightly more complex. So I'm going to create a couple of edge loops along there, and I'm going to extrude these 2 faces out there. Okay, and I'm just going to make the building quite thin there as well. Okay, so we're going to assign a new material, and we're going to go to Lambert, close this out of the way, and rename it to bricks, and change the color to a file, and choose a brick texture there. Okay, so at first it doesn't look like May's done too much of a bad job, other than the scale, but you'll notice where we've been extruding things, May does get a bit confused, and that's fine. So we're going to select our geometry here, and now we're going to look at the UV texture editor to see what has Maya done to show our geometry, and it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Obviously it's sort of tried to unwrap it from a top view, but it's left out these faces here. So what we have to do, and planar mapping will be quite time consuming to go to each angle to project it from. So what we're going to do is automatically map this. So go to create UVs. Actually, before we do that, I'm just going to show you it hasn't done a good job of representing these faces here. And also, if we go to UV and I want to move my geometry around in the UV texture editor like I did to the cobblestones, so I want some bricks at a different angle on the top, I can't just go and select the face and rotate it on its own, because the other geometry is tied up to the edges, it's stitched to the edges. So if I rotate it, you can see what happens to the other faces, it gets really messed up. So we need it to be separated as well, and then join it up ourselves later. So if we go to create UVs, automatic mapping, you can see it's put all the texture at different angles, but in our UV texture editor, you can see it's all separated, and it has recognized now that these faces that we extruded are actually there. So I'm going to move this geometry out of the way. I just want to focus on certain parts, which I'll move back over the bricks that we can see. So I'm going to go to UV, drag a box, selection box over everything, move these over to the left, and move it all out of the way. Before we go any further, I'm going to clean up my geometry. I know I'm never going to want to see the base of it, and at the moment I've got these unnecessary faces being shown in the UV texture editor. So I'm just going to go to face and delete them, because I know I'm never going to see them and I don't want to have to worry about them unnecessarily. Okay, so if I want to change the scale or rotation of these bricks here, I can select these two faces. In fact, if I select this one face, and I want to just select the UVs that go around that one face, select it in the 3D viewport as a face, and then hold down right click and go to UV in the UV texture editor. You can see that because we've selected the face, it has hidden all of the other geometry there, which means we're free to drag a selection box and select it. Now if we try and move it, you'll see that the side edge here is joined up to it. This is because it is at a perfectly flat angle, and May has decided that it will be fine for that to be stitched up together, which is great. So I want to expand my selection of UVs to cover that as well, so that when we move it, it's all selected. So to do that, we can hold down Control and go right click and go to shell. This works with even just selecting one part, one UV of a face. Hold Control, right click, and go to shell, and the whole shell is selected. Everything that's joined to it will be able to move along with it now. So we can rotate it like that. Now if you resize this on its own without the other geometry, let's say we just do that, and then we want to stitch an edge later. So we go to edge, and let's say I want to join up this edge, so these bricks match those bricks. I've obviously selected it, and I go and click on the join up tool, and because it's not at the same scale, it's all messed it up. So before you resize your geometry in the UV texture editor, make sure that you do resize everything together. So I'm just putting it back where it was. I'm going to select all the UVs of that object and just press R and resize them up until I'm happy that the bricks are about the size they should be. Okay, I'm going to move them out of the way again. Select this face there, and let's go to UV and go to right click to shell. I'm going to move it back over the texture there just so I can see it. So I can rotate it. I'll do that now. I'm just going to make sure that the shadow underneath the bricks is actually at the bottom, and if I look at the corner now, so if I deselect my geometry and zoom in, you can see the bricks they're nearly lined up properly, but if you look closely, they're not matching. The texture itself, you've got the white sort of bits between the bricks here that aren't really going around the corner, and you can see it's not really lined up properly as well. So, and also when I move this, this isn't joined to it. So all we have to do is click on the edge that you want to join up in the 3D viewport, and obviously you've made sure they're the same scale. So now just click on this tool here, the move and sew selected edges, and you can see there this face has now snapped up and joined to the end of this here. So now if we go to UV and go to shell, you can see it's increased the amount of geometry on there. We're going to do this all the way around our building here. So I can click on an edge in the UV texture editor. If I zoom out, I will see that two edges are selected. So one edge in the 3D viewport is actually two edges in the UV texture editor. So I've clicked on that edge and I want to move and sew, and I just have to keep on selecting that, clicking on the move and sew, and we are in full control now of how our building is unwrapped in the UV texture editor. So I think we're going up to the over to the back face now, and all the bricks are at the same height and they do join up quite nicely. We'll leave the top face for now. That might have a different material selected. We're not going to see that. So we might think it's okay, but if we zoom into the actual face over here, you can see that whoever took the photo of the bricks so if we zoom into the wall here, we can see that whoever took the photo of the bricks hasn't created it so that it's tileable yet, which is fine and it's normal. And when you get textures off the internet to put in your geometry, most of them will not be joined up properly at the edges. So we have to jump into Photoshop and clear this up ourselves. So I'm going to open up Photoshop and I'm going to drag in the bricks texture that we've got, and we're going to just set this up so that we can actually see how the tiles look in Photoshop. So if we go to Filter, Other, Offset, by default it's 0. I'm just going to type, you can either type in about 500, I'm just going to drag it up to about 500 there. Just do the horizontal for now and press OK. It's not that obvious with this texture, but if you zoom in you can see where these bricks are darker, these bricks are lighter, the mortar's all white and stuff in there. So we need to use the clone stamp tool, which is over here, and I'm going to select one that's about 1.5 bricks in size, and then hold down Alt, and it's quite important that you hold down Alt and choose a spot that you can recognize. So I'm going to choose this sort of T shape here, just so I know where to put it. So if I just move over to some bricks somewhere near this nasty edge, I'm going to line them up so that the preview doesn't look too bad, and I'm going to drag over to the line itself now, and I'm just going to move and drag the mouse up there and all the way down, so this line in the middle is sort of being blurred out, and we're copying the bricks over from the middle. And if you're doing this at the right height, then it shouldn't look too bad. If you zoom out, it does still look kind of bad at the top there, like there is a blurred outline now going across. So I'm just going to play around and get rid of the white area over there, just so that there's a bit more balance. So if we zoom out, it's not quite as obvious anymore that the texture joins up in the middle. We're going to go Filter, Other, and Offset. Just type in 0 up there, and Vertical I'm going to type in 500 there. Now, because of the angle of the bricks, it's not too obvious where the top of the texture is, but you can see some bricks have started off there dark bricks, and then the ones above are quite light. So I'm just going to select a row, a couple of rows above, select a point I can recognize, and just move down here to a similar set of bricks and drag away on the edge there. So you could use smaller brushes and stuff to get a much nicer effect, but I'm just going to do that for now. Be careful when you're clone stamping. If you get to the edge of the texture, it isn't going to loop over to the other side for you. It will just clone stamp a nasty edge there. So just be careful with that. So I'm just going to select the edge of that brick there and paste that over there. It's not a perfect job, and there's still a bit of blurriness there, but I don't really care. That'll do for now. So we're going to save that. I'm just going to make sure we save over the original texture. Click Save, replace it, yes. So if we go into Maya now, you can see even though we've overwritten it in Windows, Maya has not updated this texture yet. So if we click on the geometry, and we need to click on the texture tab. So I'm going to delete history and then click on the texture that we named bricks, go to color, sorry, I'll do that one more time, where there used to be a checkerboard, there's now an input symbol showing that for the color there is an input of a texture. So we're going to click on that and then click on where it says reload. You can also change the texture with the folder, but we just clicked reload, and now if we zoom in, there are no more nasty edges going up and down the wall. So one more thing we're going to do is click on the cylinder here, and I'm going to assign a new material, a Lambert. I'm going to just name it metal. Okay. Obviously, if you're really worried about shaders and stuff, you might want to change Lambert to a Fong later on, which has got reflective properties. So it doesn't really matter for now. So I've got that. I'm going to change it to metal. Okay, and click on color, go to file, and choose the metal texture here as well. Okay, click on open. So we've got like this really nasty battered texture, and Maya by default has tried to set up a cylindrical map for us, which isn't too bad. You will find, however, after you've gone along and added your own geometry, so I'm going to press undo. Let's add some geometry here. So you'll see now that the geometry isn't quite as good, especially on the top. It doesn't really know how to present it. So I'm just going to click on the whole cylinder to start with, and I'm going to go to Create UVs, Cylindrical Mapping. And it has recognized the angle that the cylinder is at, which is great, and it sets it up for us there. So if we go now into our UV texture editor, you can see it's unwrapped the cylinder nicely for us there, and except for the top face. So what I'd recommend doing is going into your top view, and then we just want to select these faces. Because these are all triangles, you can't just double click and expect them all to be selected. We have to either click on them individually or go to double click on our selection tool and go to camera based selection. And if I drag a selection box over the top of the geometry there and go back into the 3D view, it's just selected the top there and this edge ring there. So if I want to undo that, I'm going to double click on that edge ring and then go back into top view, hold down shift and select it again, and this time it hasn't selected that edge ring there. So back in the top view, I can go to Create UVs and Planar Mapping, and now it's planar mapped the same texture to the top but at a much better angle. So that's looking much nicer. So the end of our cylinder still isn't joined up properly, so again we'd have to go into Photoshop and join up the texture. So I'll drag the texture as a new file into there. I'll go to Filter, Other Offset, Filter, Other Offset. I'm not worried about the vertical, just the horizontal, so I'm going to move that over there, click OK. I'm going to get quite a large clone stamp size here because the colour does vary quite a lot, and I'm just going to use this line along here as a guide for me. Hold down Alt and then move the preview over to there and just drag up. I'm getting rid of these screw bits, but that's fine. Okay. So although you can also play around with the dodge and burn tool to sort of make darker shadows brighter so that they don't look as repeated, but that can take time, so we're not worried about that for now. But now we know our texture is tiled or tileable, so we're going to save that over the original file. Go to save, click OK, click OK, back into Maya, and we're going to update the texture again by clicking on the source and go to reload. and now if we spin the barrel around, it's looking quite nice. Okay, so one last thing we're going to do is just use some if you have a texture map that's already set up. So we're going to go and assign in one last material of the tutorial. It's going to be a Lambert, and we're going to call it TV, and we're going to go to the checkerboard next to color, choose file, and choose a texture. It's going to be TV map. Open that one up, and we're going to go to create UVs and automatic mapping to start with. So now in our UV texture editor we need to have over here, I want to make sure that this face shows the front of the TV. So I need to make sure first of all that they're all at the right scale, otherwise we're going to have some nasty stretching issues later. So I'm going to scale them all up so they're about the right height of the TV there. If the texture isn't at the right angle, like if you move over you can see the TV logo might be upside down, just rotate everything around so that you can see it's facing the right way. Okay, so I've just got that set up to about there. I'm going to stretch everything a bit as well, like that, and just so the TV texture fits in the geometry, like that. That'll do for now. We're probably going to have to do quite a lot of this manually, so if I click in my geometry and I'm going to squish it down so the TV looks about the right size. It is always better to, well, usually better to modify your geometry after you've textured some of it, so that it's less confusing later on in here. So although this TV will look a bit better later, it's just a cube at the moment. So I want to zoom in now to this face and make sure the UVs are lined up perfectly like this. Okay, once you're happy with the front face, now it's time to go to your edge and join up some more geometry there. So we've just moved this edge here and it's gone slightly too fast, so I'm going to press go to UV, press W and stretch it in a bit like that, and again we can see the TV won't be this deep, so I'm going to stretch it into just about there. Now this face, if we go and join the edge up, it's actually going to go over the wrong way. If you imagine that this part of the texture is over there, it's not really what we want. So I'm going to select that face and find it in the UV texture editor, go to UV, and instead of joining it up, I'm just going to move it above the one opposite and line that up as best as I can, and go and move the UVs in so it matches the shape. If you really want to make sure that your edges in the UV texture editor are perfectly flat or snapped up together, you can select a cluster of UVs and then click on this tool here, which aligns them all up to a certain level. So I've done that, so I just know it's a bit neater now as well. So that obviously lines them all up to the lowest one or the highest one there. I can see here the face is actually the wrong way round. That's fine, so I've clicked on it in the 3D viewport, go to UV, drag a selection over there, and I'm going to rotate it 4 times like that. Get this top face and move that over to there. And I just need to make sure that the edge is lined up properly. So if it's getting quite difficult now to select UVs without other ones, if I just want to see which edge is the problematic one, I can just click on the edge. Oops. So just be very careful when you zoom in, and only select the UVs you want and just line it up until you're pleased. Okay, and then I'm just going to move the TV out a bit and do the back face. Click on the face and go to UV and move it up there. It's probably going to be upside down, so I'm going to rotate that round like that. So the side views aren't that nice. I literally just got this image from from a normal photo of a TV off the internet and just sort of lined up everything myself so that it could be UV mapped. So we might have to do that as well. So I'm going to move that up to about there, and that'll do for now. So once your TV is sort of about right, I do believe that is upside down. So I'm going to go to UV and I'm going to resize that so it is facing the right way there. And then we need to just make sure this top face is lined up properly so that the this ring is about just lined up properly there. So once you've played around with that, now we can go ahead and whoops. So again, I'm not too happy with this dark part here, so I've got to click on this face and shift click on that face and go to UV, and I'm going to move, we'll just resize them back a bit there, and I will have to do the same to the top now as well. There we go. And once you've done that, we can create an edge loop over where this part of the texture ends there. I'm going to create one more just before it. If you, I'll show you now. If I want to resize this, so I've just selected that ring by double clicking, click on resize, move it down and move it across. If I had selected this too close to that edge there, all this texture would be very stretched. So I've moved it far away enough so that when I resize this down, it doesn't look too bad. Click on the rear face, resize that down a bit. The textures do start to display poorly like this, so we can correct that by clicking on them in the 3D viewport, go to UV and have a go at resizing them so it matches the geometry there, and go to UV and resize that. So that doesn't look too bad now. And when we go ahead and do the face, I'm just going to get an edge loop about there, about there, about there. Now I want the face of the TV to be beveled quite a lot, but I don't want to add too many edge loops to the rest of the TV there. So I'm going to duplicate the entire textured object. I'm going to select that face in the middle, shift select everything else and press delete. So, whoops. I've still got camera based selection on. I need to turn that off. Close that again. Go to face, shift select everything, press delete. Go to I want to just line this texture up on this piece here like that, so you can't see any of the shadows. I'm going to delete this one and extrude in some edges there. So we go to edge, double click, extrude that in just to give us something to work with. I need to line that up. So I've double clicked on that ring there. I'm going to go to create UV's automatic mapping because I've created some new faces here and it hasn't done the textures properly. Let's go to UV, and I just want it to be the same color gray as the TV around it, so I can resize it so it's really small and utilize that part of the texture there. And then go over to my TV, add a couple of edge loops along like that, and then simply pull them out until I'm happy. So just so you've got a bit of a bevel in the TV, and press W and move that over there, and you've got a simple texture TV. So we can go and group that together and center pivot, and once you've textured everything, then you can go ahead and duplicate stuff to your heart's content. And those are the basic principles of texturing.